All right guys, we're back for the G8 project. You guys know what we're doing to this car. If you're new to the channel, we're restoring our G8, giving it a brand new paint job, and we're doing this one with Eastwood. So we're gonna be using all their products, from their primers to their sealers, all the way up to the base coat and clear coat, and getting this G8 all cleaned up and giving it a nice finish. So in this episode here, we're gonna go ahead and get this thing all body worked and primered, get it in the booth, get it primed up. That way the next episode we'll be spraying this car, and we've already started working on some of the parts, so let me take you guys over there and show it to you. All right, so you guys see here we have a very faded paint job on this here car. So we started sanding it down and realized that there's no sense of leaving this on here at all. We're gonna go ahead and get this thing stripped down to the bare metal on both the hood and the trunk. So we've already begun doing both panels on these, because this is what we're gonna hit with the epoxy primer. So let me show you the hood. Once we get this here sanded down, this is what this is gonna look like here. It's gonna look like this here bare metal area here. We've already started on this, and we didn't want to play any games trying to save any of the primer, because this front edge of the hood was all chipped up, so there wasn't any sense of doing that. So we stripped it down to the bare metal. We'll hit this with the epoxy as well as the trunk. But today we're gonna be getting ready to do the body work on the vehicle here. You guys see this is a clean car, but it had a faded paint job. If you've seen in episode 1, we're dealing with a lot of faded paint. So we're gonna go ahead and get this thing body work today, primed up, and hit this part of the car with the 2K primer on it. So let's get into it. All right, now Mike's gonna go ahead and refine up the bare metal and hit all the edges with a 320 grit. That way this thing is ready for the epoxy. All right, so while Mike is doing that, we're gonna go ahead now and try to find all the little dinghies that we see on this here vehicle. We have a couple small ones, and get them treated up. That way this thing is gonna be nice and straight. We don't wanna leave any dents in this car once it's done. So we've just got some small ones, but we've gotta get them handled. All right, so we've got all our dents marked on the vehicle. You guys see we put a little bit of a marker, and we're gonna go ahead and clean that area off. You wanna make sure that you clean the area. That way, once you go ahead and sand it, you're not putting anything back into the sand scratch. So we're gonna get off that mark. And in that area there where we see the body work, these are very small dinghies, so we're not gonna have to do much to these. We're just gonna hit them with a little bit of glaze, and we may be even able to block out most of it. So what I like to do is, now that I have them marked, this is clean, I'll hit it with a block with 180 on it in the area where I'm gonna be putting the glaze or whatever filler you guys are using. On something this small, I would just use a small polyester glaze. That way you do not have to worry about sanding too much, because these are very minimal dents. And this one here is probably gonna block out without even putting anything on it. So, but that's the steps that I'll do. I'll go over, now that I have them marked, I'll wipe off that, clean the area, and then we'll go ahead and get everything treated up nicely and fix all these dents on here. So there's not many, but we got to take care of them, like I said, to get a nice finish. So I'm gonna go ahead and continue on doing that, but that's the process I do. I mark them, clean it, hit it with a 180 block. I don't really DA this, because there's no sense of making this a little bit wavy to put filler on. You might as well just block it to get the same adhesion, and you're not making any chance of having any problems with the DA chattering around and making waves in it. So and as I was saying, most of these are gonna block out. There's a lot of material on these old school cars, and these were very small, minimal dents. Mike was telling me that he had his PDR guy take out some of the dents in this one, so that might be what I'm actually seeing, is just some of his PDR work that needs to be just blocked out now and hit with the 2K. So the other side is for sure gonna need a little bit of putty on it, but these are small enough that we do not probably even have to put any putty on them. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the rest of these blocked out and get this side finished up. All right, so now that we've got all the bodywork areas defined, we're gonna go ahead now and clean the rest of the panels, because we are gonna be priming this car. So I like to clean it once I have my areas marked that are gonna need maybe some putty work. We actually got lucky on this one. So since Mike had his PDR guy do the body work, everything blocked out on this car but this one dent in the quarter panel. So this is the only area we're gonna have to hit with a little bit of polyester on it. So I'm gonna get the rest of the car cleaned down, because I'm gonna buzz over this before I actually start wiping down the putty, because that's more work than this. This is just a quick wipe, one block and it's done. So I gotta get this thing all cleaned down, make sure we don't have any chips, because you also wanna look for chips as well as scratches. But the best way to do that is to go ahead and get your panel sanded, because you can look for them all day, but until you get this sanded down, that's when you're really gonna be able to see the chips the most. So let's clean the sides and then get this thing buzzed down. And we're using on this here a wax and grease, and then I'm gonna hit this with the waterborne as well, so we get both type of substrates off the vehicle. That way we can get this thing ready to roll. So let's get this here clean. We'll buzz it down. He's doing the hood right now. He's almost got that finished up. I'll show you that in a minute. And we'll be moving into the primer. All right, you guys see here, we've taped off this here. This is the only thing on this car that wasn't de-trimmed that has a chance of sanding it. These are black on this car, but we're gonna be sanding up here on this sail panel. So we wanna tape off this. That way we do not sand it. So like I told you guys before, the more you take off of the job, the better off you're gonna be. But if you're leaving stuff on the vehicle because you don't feel comfortable doing that, make sure you mask them up before you sand it. Because I've seen a lot of cars through the years that people painted, and then you'll go around and look and you can see where they hit the chrome with the actual sander or the glass. So make sure you cover up your stuff really good, because you don't wanna have that done to your car once it's all painted. So we're gonna hit this now with a 320 grit. 320 grit's a good grit to sand down something, to get a coarse enough bite with whatever product you're using. But also, if you do not prime it, you can move right into your sealer and your base coat. So you don't wanna go too coarse to where you have to prime it if you're trying to minimize the work in your car. I like to hit it with a 320. That's a good grit that you can either go both ways, prime it or move right into your paint booth. So we're gonna buzz it with 320, see what else we find. All right, so we've got the whole side of this thing now sanded down. And if you haven't noticed already, we're stripping most of the top surfaces. That's why we took down the hood to bare metal as well as the trunk. So most of these resprays will get stripped on the top surfaces. You guys see here, I stripped it down to the factory E-coat on the tops of the sail panels as well as the tops of the quarters. That way we get all that material off of there. You don't want to have that material on there that's old and brittle and porous, because it's just going to have more problems later when that primer tries to soak in. So get off as much as you can. I've done many of these through the years. This is the normal procedure usually when you get a sun faded job, especially back in the old days when they had lacquer. So lacquer used to crack on the top surfaces, and anybody in the business knows that you would strip them down to the body line. You guys see here, we have them stripped all the way on the top to the body line. And then on the rest of it, we'll be fine because the paint isn't beat up enough and doesn't need anything else. So here's what I was telling you guys when you sand it down. Right there's a chip. So what happens is the dust gets filled in the chip and you're able to see them. So we have a couple on this that we have to fill, nothing crazy. And now I'm gonna go ahead and hit this spot here with our polyester. All right, now that we've got it fully sanded, and you guys seen me hit this with the 180 grit. You guys know everywhere that we have a spot, that's where we repaired it. So you can still see where your damage is, even if you sand the whole panel down, because we knocked it down further. That way you're able to see what you need. So make sure you clean it off now before you put your putty on. That way you have a nice clean surface for the repair material to stick to. So get that clean back off. Make sure you dry it really good. Let this dry before you put your filler on. That way you don't trap any solvents underneath. So you guys see it's a little wet. You'll see it in a minute. It'll start to dry, and then we'll be able to apply the polyester. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and hit it with our polyester, and we're gonna be using a finishing glaze on this one. This is the Platinum Plus finishing glaze, and we're gonna just need a little bit on this. So we're gonna go ahead and use our board. This is a wax board. that's used a lot in the shops because you can tear off the piece and then you're ready to go for the next time you need it. So we'll put a little bit of putty on here and then we'll mix in our hardener. That way we can get this thing finished up. So this is a 2-component putty. You do not want to use anything that's a 1K product because it doesn't have a hardener in it. So this here will activate the putty once we put this hardener in. And the way that I like to do it is make sure you knead up your hardener before you use it. Sometimes these will separate in the tube. So knead it really well before you take it and squeeze it into the actual putty. So I like to just run a little bead almost the whole distance of the putty, but do not under harden it because it will not harden up. So we've got our putty and we've got our hardener in there. Now we're just going to go ahead and mix it up and get it applied. So these are nice. They have a spot for your hand to actually hold it. That way you can mix it up nice and get a good tight wipe, because you want to make sure that you knead this good, mix it in really nice and get everything mixed in, because if you don't, you'll have a problem when you try to sand it because you'll have an unmixed area. So mix it up nice. I like to just do this little pattern and chop into it. Same thing. Get it mixed and don't wait too long because it will harden up on you. So we'll go ahead and apply this now. And we don't need much. We just need a little bit. It was a low spot. We're gonna go ahead and hit it on the body line. I like to hit below the line because this was kind of in the line and above the line. So we'll give it a nice tight wipe. Try to run it where the line is. You guys see here, there's a body line. So you're gonna wanna run your putty this way. I see some guys, they wipe their Bondo this way, and that's gonna leave lines from the spreader in your Bondo, and then you have to sand that away. So you have to realize it's the same thing when you're applying putty as you are painting. You wanna put it on nice and even with strokes going the way you're gonna look at the car. You do not wanna chop it up and wipe your putty this way. Wipe it with the length of the panel. So that's all we need. We're ready to go. We'll let that harden up and we'll block it down. All right, so as I'm doing the car, Mike is over here finishing up the trunk and the hood. And we are stripping it the same way. We're taking it down to where the sun hasn't faded it because it's not needed. So the back of the trunk is fine. He's cleaning it off now. We've got the top of it stripped down. We'll hit that with the epoxy. And then this here is the hood all finished up. These two parts will hit with epoxy. The body will hit with the 2K. And if we do have any bare metal, we'll hit it with a little etch before we apply the 2K. All right, so one thing I like to do is hit it with a final 320 grit just to knock down some of the 180, and it's gonna blend it in nicely around these areas because we do not wanna have any 180 grit scratches. If we can eliminate them, that would be better. So I like to get it finer, and I like to use the block. That way I'm not using anything that could give any waves in this. So we'll go around the area with this, hit it with our block, refine it a little bit, and you guys see how when I took that on both sides of the line, I only needed to get a little bit here, but that's why I wiped down low, so that way it would stay just in that line area. So now we're going around the edges with the 320. So we got most of it ready to go. And the last thing we're doing is pulling off the antenna bezel. All right, so while Mike's finishing up the rest of the body of the vehicle, we're gonna go ahead and mask up the bottom of the hood as well as the trunk. You wanna make sure you cover up anything that you do not wanna have primer on, because it will get around the bottom. Even though you think you're just priming the top, make sure you cover up the areas you do not wanna have any overspray on, because once you get it on there, especially with these 2K primers like an epoxy as well as the 2K urethane, it's gonna be very hard getting them off. It's not like the old spray can lacquer that some of you guys at the house might be used to. So you can't get it off, and it's very hard to even try to eliminate any little bits of overspray on it. So mask off any areas you don't want, and we'll show you that when we get to the body. So we're gonna just run around the edge of this with our normal 1.5" tape, and then mask it off with our 36 paper. That way we do not have any problems, because we're not doing the bottom of the hood or the trunk. All right, so we've got the vehicle in here now, and we're masking up the jams. Make sure you cover your jams up well. You guys see here, we started running our 1.5" tape along the edge. You guys know I always bring it out to the edge when I'm priming. That way I can go in a little further later and get my paint to go past the primer. We are using the black, so that is a good feature from Eastwood, that they have black primer, because in case it does creep in, it's not gonna be that hard to get rid of the edge, because it's gonna be in the black shade. So once we paint this car, we are going to be removing the windshield as well as the rear glass. That way we can get a nice clean job. But this is an in-between job that we're doing at the shop. So we're pulling it in and out of the shop, because this is Mike's personal vehicle. So we can't keep it inside while we're doing production work. So we're bringing it in and out. So we're going to keep it sealed up with the glass to the last minute, and then pull the windshield and rear glass. That way everything is done nice, and he gets a clean job out of this, because you guys know he's really beating me up on this one. All right, so we've got it all bagged up, and now Mike's gonna go ahead and hit it and clean it with the prep saw. He's gonna hit the body as well as the parts here and get everything cleaned up. We're gonna be mixing up our primer now. While he does that, we're gonna go in here and get our lids on our primers. That way we're ready to go for this thing. But we've got it bagged up nice, and I like using the plastic. You guys know I don't really use much paper if you follow me on the channel. To me, you don't have any lint, obviously, with plastic, and I don't care what paper you use, there's lint in paper, so you eliminate that. This isn't such a crucial thing now, being we're using it for primer, but when you're bagging a car for paint, plastic's the way to go. All right, we're gonna get it all shaken up. Being this stuff is new, you wanna shake it up if you have a shaker. If you don't, make sure you mix it up really good with a stick. That way you get all the fillers that are laying down in the bottom of the can. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and put one of our mixing lids on this. That way we can use it if we have to do any more, because we are gonna be using the epoxy for the job. So it's nice seeing that black for a 2K. I'm really curious to see how black it really is, because the blacker the better to me for a primer. That way you don't have to put as much paint down to cover it. So we'll go ahead and we'll put this on the stir. We'll get it mixed up even more, and then we'll be putting it on the body. All right, so we've got 2 coats on there. We gave it about 5 minutes in between. This is a very thick, high build primer. So for the application that I was doing, I went ahead and thinned it down about 10%, because we're doing this more as just a treatment on the metal. We didn't really have a lot of Bondo. So if you guys are doing a restoration job at the house, this is a good product for you guys, and it will put down a lot of primer on the surface. So with your body work, you'll be able to block it a lot. For me, we just needed a little bit of primer on there. We didn't need that thick of a primer, so we thinned it down, and then it sprayed out a lot thinner and smoother. So that's what I needed for this application. If you're doing a big restoration job, go ahead and leave it the way that it is, because it'll really give you a lot of primer to block out and get straight. So once we get done with the epoxy, I'm gonna bring you guys in there and show you how nice it lays down. It's got a beautiful, nice eggshell appearance to it. And the good part is we're gonna be getting this thing out in the sun, so it's gonna be baking over a couple of day period. That way it does all the drying it needs to before we get back into this job. All right, so this here is the epoxy now. This one is a 1-to-1 product. You guys see everything is on the actual can. All right, so that's the epoxy, and that is a 1-to-1 product. We put one nice coat. You guys see the sheen on that. That's a really nice product from Eastwood. I've used this one before. And we're gonna let that dry for about 20 minutes. Being an epoxy, you wanna give it a little bit more time. We're gonna put 2 coats of that on as well. But this one's gonna be sitting around the shop for a couple of days before we get back on it. So I just wanna get something on it to treat it. And then once that sets up, we'll scuff it down lightly before we paint it. So let's let it set up. We'll put another coat, and then I'll bring you guys in and show you the whole job finished up. All right, so I told you guys it was black, but it's just not shiny yet. So this here is the finished up primer job for the G8. You guys see, this is the 2K urethane. It's got a beautiful sheen as well as the epoxy. This is a very, very good epoxy primer. It's very good for corrosion and it's good for durability. So once this thing sets up, we're gonna get it out of here. And in the next episode, you guys are gonna see this thing shiny. I didn't try to trick you on the thumbnail, but it is black. So we'll see you guys on the next one.